powerful people don't want to tell the truth to the people because it's more important to them to get their ideology in play than to let the folks know what the truth is.
Microsoft founder Bill Gates has committed over $10 billion over the next decade to deliver vaccines to the world's poorest countries.
And today we're announcing a commitment over this next decade, which we think of as a decade of vaccines. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. We'll spend over $10 billion on vaccines.
For the very innovations that are making possible dramatic improvements in human well-being are also creating new problems which raise the specter of an alarming and possibly catastrophic disaster to the biosphere we live in. And herein lies the dilemma that we all face. The world's average life expectancy has increased from 46 years in 1950s to 63 years today. The result is a world population that has risen during the same short period of time geometrically to almost 6 billion people and could easily exceed 8 billion by the year 2020. The negative impact of population growth on all of our planetary ecosystems is becoming appallingly evident. Unless nations will agree to work together to tackle these cross-border challenges posed by population growth, overconsumption of resources, and environmental degradation, the prospects for a decent life on our planet will be threatened. The United Nations can and should play an essential role in helping the world find a satisfactory way of stabilizing world population and stimulating economic development. Economic growth is, of course, an inevitable corollary of a growing population and is essential to improved standards of living. But without careful coordination, unrestrained economic growth poses further threats to our environment. It was pointed out at the conference that growth is most efficiently managed by the private sector. But regulation of the process by national governments and international bodies is also needed, and once again, the United Nations should certainly be among the catalysts and coordinators of this process.
The myth of overpopulation originated in England in 1798, when a vicar named Thomas Malthus, who fancied himself something of a mathematician, saw that food production increased incrementally, but people reproduced exponentially. He sat down and did some simple math, and summarily decided that the world would be out of food by 1890. He blamed reduced mortality rates, and recommended killing off the have-nots of society, lest the haves starve to death. This cry was taken up by Paul Ehrlich of Stanford University in 1968. who claimed that reckless human reproduction had overwhelmed the Earth. Massive famines would result, which would destroy, best case scenario, 1/5 of humanity by the end of the 70s. And the planet would follow. This fear produced large donations for the newly created UNFPA. This fear produced large donations for the newly created UNFPA. Which thrives on an imagined crisis that has been both imminent and rescheduled again and again over the past 2 centuries. The truth of the matter is that every family on this planet could have a house with a yard and all live together on a landmass the size of Texas, which is really just a small corner of the planet. The population of Earth will peak in 30 years and then start to go back down. We're not overpopulated. Do the math.
A 7.0 earthquake hit Haiti on January 12, 2010. 25 out of 27 government buildings collapsed, along with nearly 300,000 others. There's enough cement rubble to build 7 Hoover dams. 3 million were left homeless. There were at least 230,000 dead.
And I'm pleased that President George W. Bush and President Bill Clinton have agreed to lead a major fundraising effort for relief, the Clinton-Bush Haiti Fund.
In this building, they already have like dead body inside.
Because they haven't cleared it out.
They can't. It's too expensive because you have to pay the government to come and get clean. And nobody knows who is inside.
How many people?
5,081 people.
Yeah. We're talking 5,000 people. How many toilets do they have?
6 toilets.
You want to go see? The toilets are very, very close to where people are actually living. Yeah.
Ok. Où est là ces toilettes? Nous pas nettoyer pour nous cette matière fécale là qu'on cause nous contaminer. Des toujours qui plus mal toujours.
Oh God. Okay.
C'est faire prévention contre maladie que le choléra qui c'est plus gros candidat nous gagne dans moment. Candidat ça, c'est seul candidat qui pas connaît ni belle femme, ni bel garçon, ni blanc, ni nègre.
So I see the signs for cholera to help prevent cholera, but where do you wash your hands? You will.
That's why thousands of American personnel, civilian and military, are on the scene working to distribute clean drinking water.
I know a lot of people want to send blankets or water. Just send your cash. Just send your cash.
A staggering 1 out of 2 American households donated $1.4 billion to charity. 10 months later, we wanted to know where that money went.
One of the things that President and I will do is to make sure your money is spent wisely.
According to the UN, there are 1.5 million internally displaced persons, or IDPs, living in about 1,300 camps. But the UN doesn't count camps of fewer than 500 people, and those camps are everywhere, crammed in alleys, parks, against churches. Experts estimate that the number is closer to 2 million.
And President Clinton and I are going to work to tap that same spirit of giving to help our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean.
Do you have a lot of people who come here to see this?
They come, but nothing.
But nothing. How is this supposed to help provide any shelter whatsoever?
And thousands of tons of emergency food supplies are arriving every day.
How many? One person?
So
this is the kitchen.
Mais parfois tout c'est pas rien le faire parce que c'est petit effort nous faire.
And thousands of tons of emergency food supplies are arriving every day.
Exactement, madame moi petite moi la nourriture. Nous gon petit monde, mais madame moi actuellement je travaille même pas travail depuis 12 janvier, je pas jeune travail me fait parce que moi c'est construction me fait c'est boss maçon. Par rapport à tout pays écrasé son plus c'est pour tant plus travail c'est comme ça tout nous pas jeune travail même tout côté malé l'aime da descendre. Parfois, je prends à pied, descendre, nous tomber moi une machine. Je ne peux pas jouer une route, une machine. Et malgré ma cherche de travail, je ne peux pas marine à parrain, je ne peux pas jouer une journée de travail.
Many Americans do not know that this happened. They gave money to make it better for you.
At this moment, we're moving forward with one of the largest relief efforts in our history to save lives and to deliver relief that averts an even larger catastrophe. And that's why it's so important to enlist and sustain the support of the American people.
Just send your cash.
Si côté pas possible rien du tout. Toutes les étapes bail manger à gogo, mais nous pas jeune cash, on a trouvé avec pas possible. Nous dit tout, c'est quelque ONG qu'on passe à timami tiri dans sachet, qu'on capé bolaria, bail les moun yo courir pour yo courir à la semaine.
One of the things that President I will do is to make sure your money is spent wisely.
The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act that I will sign today, a plan that meets the principles I laid out in January, is the most sweeping economic recovery package in our history.
And ugly new questions about the jobs created or saved under the almost $800 billion stimulus program. Fox News confirming that the White House job site reporting thousands of jobs in congressional districts that do not exist in America.
And what makes this recovery plan so important is not just that it will create or save 3.5 million jobs over the next 2 years.
Plan February of 2009, they said that unemployment it would be kept to 8% or lower.
Right, polling firm Gallup telling a different story than the government. Gallup says unemployment increased to 10.1% in September. So is the job situation even worse than we thought, Jen?
Well, with those numbers, it definitely is worse than we thought. And unfortunately, we're not seeing anything innovative that's coming out saying these are how we're creating jobs and we can do it quickly. And that's leaving people in a very desperate state.
It's an investment that will save taxpayers over $1 billion.
Yet another report of questionable stimulus spending. A government review now finding that $162 million worth of stimulus is missing. Where it went, nobody knows. They can't trace it.
We will need to end the culture where we ignore problems until they become full-blown crises.
Every branch of government wastes money, right? That's the point. That's why we shouldn't hope that the federal government is going to bail us out.
We're going to look at a really famous verse in Isaiah 40, verse 8 today. Here's what it says. Listen. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever. It would be nearly impossible to overestimate the influence the Bible has had on human civilization, especially here in the West. In spite of the relentless secularization of our Western culture, some 80,000 copies of the Bible still fly off the bookstore shelves every single week. Countless times, this book's been threatened with extinction at the hands of people who hate it, and yet somehow it keeps rising back to the surface. The Romans couldn't get rid of this book. Its enemies during the Dark Ages couldn't get rid of this book, and the Bible easily outlived the atheistic communism of the Soviet Empire. Cultural trends come and go. Empires rise and fall, but the Bible is always there when everything else moves on. Just try to imagine a world where the Bible was never written. Try to think about what we'd be missing. The art, the literature, the music, the philosophy, the legal system, you name it. Even though modern thinkers would love to believe that the Bible is somewhat irrelevant to modern culture, nothing could be further from the truth. Our civilization literally stands on the ideas presented between the pages of God's book. That's because it's built on something eternal, the Word and character of the living God. That's what sets this book apart from other books available at the bookstore. Human philosophy, when you put it to the test, it always falters. Invariably, we find out we got it wrong. Our theories, our social experiments, our political and economic models, they always hit a dead end. But the teachings of the Bible persist because they actually represent the very thoughts of God in human language. And God never gets anything wrong. The tragic part is that we always seem to turn to the Bible as a last resort. First, we try our own wisdom, our own way of thinking, and when that doesn't work and we're faced with a crisis, then we try it God's way. We only seem to ask God what He thinks when everything else fails. Even in Christian circles, we sometimes hesitate over the Bible. In a postmodern secular world, are people really interested in what the Bible says? In a world where people assume there's no such thing as objective right and wrong, do we dare mention a book that claims to have the absolute truth? How bold can we be in our assertions that we've actually heard from God? The more civilization declines, the more we're starting to realize that our forefathers really did have something solid to live by. The next generation is looking at the wreckage of human civilization brought on by our godless lifestyle over the last few decades, and it's pretty clear to them that their parents didn't have all the answers. Technological advance and industrialization have failed to address the most important questions that plague the human heart. The social experiments that came out of the 1960s have done nothing to improve our way of life. And the generation now poised to take responsibility on this planet recognizes just how empty human ways of thinking have been. And that generation is also poised to rediscover the timeless words of God that live on long after the flowers fade and the grass withers. Which source do you suppose is going to help you build a better way to live?